Optics are very cool. Not boring see in the daytime optics, but see in the night optics. And today's guest has some of the coolest night vision devices that have ever been invented. Welcome back to another episode of T-Rex Talk, and today my guest is Nick Chen. Nick is a friend to the industry in a kind of an interesting way. Nick, you've got a hobby. Is it a hobby or is it actually your job? You have the most esoteric imaging devices, night vision devices, optical devices. How did you get into this?
You can thank the state of California for that.
Okay.
So before I was living in Pennsylvania, rest of America, where we can, express our freedoms however we want and exercise our freedoms however we want. But then my wife took a very lucrative job with Zeiss, and that would require us to move back to California. It was good for the family because that's where my parents are most of the time, so they could see the grandkids. But for firearm content creation, obviously it sucks a lot. And then I started getting into night vision when I was just before I was leaving Pennsylvania. So that just kind of blossomed, not because like, oh, I need to find something else to do. It's just, why did it take me so long to buy night vision? This is an amazing superpower. Like, why did I wait so long?
Yeah.
And it just became an addiction. I want to try new things. I want to try other things. I'll build my own stuff. And it just snowballed from there. And then when I was writing for the firearm blog, my editor said, hey, do you want to take over the Friday Night Lights weekly series? I said, yeah, sure. I could fill it with flashlights and lasers and stuff. And then the night vision thing just kind of just avalanched.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Not just a snowball, but an avalanche. Well, there's a bunch of historical stuff that you have, but you aren't just limited to night vision. I have seen you pop up other places in the gun industry using your photographic and videographic skills and tools to document other stuff. Like Jonathan Wild, who we talked to a couple of years ago, of Wild Arms, builds very interesting. They're still experimental, but they're essentially historical recreations of launchers, rockets, various different devices, and you helped document some of his test firings.
Yes.
Of one of his projects.
Two projects. So I got invited to
two of his projects. Yeah, and I think you made his like book covers and have participated in a bunch of stuff.
So I didn't do the book covers, but the Fliegerfaust. So he did the Panzerfaust first. And it was actually my coworker Luke who kind of knew him and wrote about the Flieger or the Panzerfaust. And then when he mentioned he was going to document the Fliegerfaust, I said, "Hey, I would love to help you document that with my Chronos high-speed camera." And we did. And we watched it launch, and we thought, okay, it's all steel construction, very low risk. Let me shoulder fire it. It's not really me firing it; it's just me holding it, and then he remotely launches the thing. But I'm the only person to shoulder fire the Fliegerfaust. And then his recent project, the 202 Flash, the four-barreled commando launcher thing.
Yes.
I documented that.
The classic commando launcher, yeah.
Yeah. There was an accident. I was downrange, behind cover, but the rockets don't behave like we think they do. There's a lot more energy. But thankfully I'm okay. Not nearly as bad as Adam from Ballistic High Speed. He had it real bad.
Correct. Yeah.
Mine was not great, but it was definitely a lot less worse than having something explode right next to your face. It just hit me in the butt.
So I have a question about that. It's one thing to discover that optics and night vision are awesome superpowers and get into that hobby. It's another thing to put your body on the line to document other aspects of this larger gun industry. So can you walk me through how you got from seeing in the dark is cool to I want to be a part of expanding this territory, so to speak?
I don't know. It was just another something that I wanted to do. I wanted to document things fast, and I don't have phantom money. That's absurd.
Yeah.
All the powder.
High speed photography is so much it's so much more involved than most people think. Yeah.
Yeah. The Chronos is definitely like the budget entry level version. And
Hmm.
I'm not looking for 4K resolution. I just want to see something fast. Now, it's not as fast as like the slow mo guys, Gavin or Bryce Fritzl with Ballistic High Speed. They're using Phantoms. But the Chronos is good enough. I could film up to 40,000 frames a second, but it looks like a potato filmed it, and you trade resolution real fast. But
Yeah.
four to 8,000 frames a second, it's not great, but I can see things happening. Like, why do guns malfunction? Like a friend of mine
Yeah.
built his own Draco thing, mini AK, and was having ejection problems every once in a while. And we're doing our best educated guess as to why. And he's fiddling with ejector, he's fiddling with trying to tune gas, and he didn't understand why
Hmm.
until we filmed it under high speed and we saw, oh, it's your dust cover. Every once in a while, the
Mm.
ejection pattern is erratic, and the brass would hit the ejection port dust cover, and that robs all the energy out from leaving the gun, and it would just bounce right back in.
Yeah.
So until we saw that, then we were still like shooting in the dark, like why is this not working?
We've done it a couple times here at the shop, not with anything quite as cool as the Chronos, but using the 1,000 frames per second that some of the Sony cameras have to try to figure out what's going on inside of the CNC machine. There's no way the naked eye can determine what is actually happening, but the ability to slow stuff down and actually get a sense of what is being done when this bit hits this material or when this ejector grabs this piece of brass. That's hugely important from an engineering perspective. Do you have an engineering background? You mentioned your wife is doing complicated stuff at Zeiss.
I tried
Uh,
dabbling in aerospace engineering, but my focus wasn't there, and I flunked out of college because I was just not because I couldn't do it. I was just my attention was split elsewhere, and I just didn't
mhm,
take it seriously. Uh, so
mhm,
I am a little more engineered minded, I guess. But just
mhm.
things like this interest me.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm the same way. I started out doing effects and animation more kind of in the film world, but when we started doing more automated manufacture at T-Rex, I realized how cool hard science and engineering really is, and the practical applications and being able to make stuff is just really unparalleled. Making fake things for TV and movies is very cool and extremely satisfying, but making stuff that works in real life is just a whole other level. And I'm so glad that I'm here, despite no formal training and getting into it pretty late.
I mean, a lot of successful people don't really need the formal training. They need that sort of um, apprenticeship to learn a
Yes.
skill, but you don't need a degree to actually be successful, right? I feel like
Yeah, I think
as
that's
long as you know how
important.
to
Yeah.
operate a CNC and know how to like design and CAD things and code, you can make almost anything now.
Yeah, and it's so much easier to get into than it was in the past. The universities are getting worse, and places like YouTube are getting better. If you want to have a guy walk you through how to do stuff in Fusion 360, I honestly believe that there are more competent YouTubers out there than there are competent teachers inside of universities. Now, I bet you that there's some great trade schools, but having somebody create a whole series of tutorials that you can follow along is just phenomenal. It's a whole new world that we're getting into now with not just manufacturing, but teaching and so forth. So it's exciting.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about your when you got into night vision. Where did you start? What was the moment when you realized that this was a superpower and a thing that you wanted to get deeper into?
So, like most people, right, there's that mental hurdle of, wow, night vision is really expensive. I'm too poor
Yeah.
to buy this. And it's not. It's a mental hurdle you have to like, you
Hmm.
know, remove yourself from. I started with the cheap digital night vision toy things. I bought this Armasight Spark Core thing that's like a Gen 1.5.
Hmm.
It was terrible, right? Then I finally got an opportunity. A friend of mine uh, was a huge supporter of this one gun store. Like he just spends thousands of dollars every month there. And because he's such a good customer, they gave an offer to say, hey, we got these trade-in PVS-14s for like $1,700. Do you want it? He said no, but he passed it on to me. I thought that's a great price. And then I realized Gen 3 PVS-14s, holy crap, this is amazing. I can see everything
Mm,
now. And I just look,
yeah,
once I had it, I just looked for more excuses to use it. Not
yeah.
beyond
Did
just,
you
yeah.
just beyond just yeah, looking at the stars and looking at other stuff, but when you had those really clunky digital sites, digital optics, uh, had you watched YouTube reviews? Like, had you done any research? Because one of the things that's interesting, and you know this really well, you know how hard it is to create a YouTube video or Instagram video that really shows the difference between those two devices. Because on screen, they may not be that different, especially with
Well, this is, we're
auto
talking,
gain and auto exposure. But once you get your eye behind analog night vision, it is so totally different than
it is.
any. Yeah, I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to show night vision well with adapters and
It's not
yeah.
possible because analog night vision is high dynamic range, like our eyeballs. It's really hard to
Mm,
capture that high dynamic range. Like there's some really good Chinese digital coming out that's really scary in terms of its performance. Its light amplification is bordering on Gen 3. I was playing with an
mm-hmm.
earlier one and it was so really shocking. We were in a real dark redwood forest. There was no ambient light whatsoever. And I could clearly see my car. I could almost make out my license plate with a digital. Now, the problem with digital is that no high dynamic range. So what happens when you start trying to drive with it and you have oncoming cars?
Headlights.
Headlights. It becomes
Yeah.
a solid ball of I don't know what's behind that. It could be one, two, three, 10 cars. I don't know, right?
Mm-hmm.
Analog night vision doesn't have that problem. So that's a big hurdle for them. But in terms of light amplification, it is getting very close to analog. Uh,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that's like a one trick pony, right? It's really hard to beat a PVS-14 that runs for 40 hours on a single AA battery.
Yeah.
So that's
The
almost bordering on magic,
yeah,
right?
the chemicals inside of the tube are doing so much of the work that the battery is just barely
It's just
pushing
sitting at it.
pushing
Yeah.
it along.
Yeah. And then now you have like newer technology where you can change out the battery compartment of your PVS-14 for a dual fuel, shove a CR123. Now you're doubling its performance to 80 hours. That's
Mm-hmm.
absurd.
It's it's pretty fascinating to me because the tube technology inside of there's a so I would point you to you've I'm sure you've seen the video that I made a few years ago on how tubes work. There's a much better video made by Veritasium on how tubes work, but
Yes.
that technology is yeah, everybody should go check out the Veritasium review um, of comparing different types of night vision. But that cathode tube technology is not new. It is
Oh,
coming up on 100 years old at this point, and it's amazing how much performance has been squeezed out of that by well the military industrial complex. To be honest, nobody else is messing around with imaging tubes at this point except the night vision industry. The three companies that make those tubes.
yeah, exactly.
It's a pretty interesting thing. So, what are you excited about for the future? Do you think we're going to get Gen 4, Gen night vision out of analog tubes? Digital is improving in different areas. You've been messing around with thermal. What are some of the different things that you are tinkering with or looking forwards to for the future?
It depends on what the activity is. I don't
Mm,
really see the military dumping a bunch of money to try and further develop analog night vision. It's good enough.
mm-hmm.
Like what more could they possibly do to make its performance better? The thing that kind of concerns me the most is the use of thermal, cheap thermal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Both in what we see in Ukraine and like just hog hunting in Texas. A buddy of mine is telling me
Yeah.
these teenagers and college kids are just going to buy some cheap ATN thing for like a grand, 2 grand, and just shooting at anything that's alive, hot and glowing in their
Yeah.
field of view, right? And if you extrapolate that further, right? You could have people with guns with thermal. They don't really need to
Hmm.
positively ID their target. It'd be great if they did, but even hunters don't do that
Yeah.
on a daily basis. Good hunters do. Other like you hear all these
Hmm.
accents like, oh, some dude shot me while I was hunting because I looked like a deer. No, you moved like a deer. They're shooting at movement. They're not shooting at
Hmm.
your shape. They're just looking for something, a hint to say, hey, that's probably something I should shoot at. I'll just send it and see what happens. And now you have that problem with
Yeah.
thermal.
Is so what the real advantage that I see with digital night vision, despite all of the disadvantages, the real advantage is now that you have a digital signal and you're putting it into a digital screen, it's much easier to do the thermal fusion, and it's much
Yes.
easier to do the overlays and the map data and the little video game displays that we're used to in other mediums. Is it possible that digital night vision that is so and cheap thermal that is so can be combined to give you more information than greater than the sum of their parts?
Yeah,
Where the
it's already
That's
here.
my hope. Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
This is a prototype
Talk about what you got there.
pre-production. So some people don't know this, but I now work. Well, I've been working for Arkin uh, since like October, trying to help them develop their
Okay.
digital night vision. Uh, I used to think digital night vision was why would I want to be associated with that? But then I realized their focus is the entry level hunter, not hey, let's milk this crap technology and charge a lot for it. Their digital scope is $500, $600. If you want one with a laser rangefinder that has ballistics and will show you where
Mm-hmm.
your bullet's going to drop's going to be, that's $700. This is
Interesting.
thermal
Yeah.
with digital, with laser rangefinder, and a ridiculously powerful illuminator to see at night. And this is on my 8.6 black build. Uh, and
Okay.
yeah, the ballistics work. I zeroed in 100 yards, shooting a 285 grain projectile subsonic. It dropped 8.5 mils at 320 yards, and I hit a pig steel target. So you have all that information in here. It has a compass, which I don't care about, but that's helpful for some people. All I care about is can
Mm-hmm.
I aim at the thing I want to aim at? Do I know where I'm holding over without having to remember that stuff? Yes.
Yeah.
Uh, so the technology is there. You can have the
Yeah.
HUD stuff. It's just all math and programming, right? Ideally, you
Mm-hmm.
want
Yeah.
something that doesn't cost as much as this, right? An E-code or E-cozy trying to inject ATAC into your night vision because it just gets, oh, it's expensive and even more expensive. Like it doesn't need to be.
Yeah. And there's a second barrier there too, which you are well aware of because you collect military stuff. Finding the documentation to actually figure out how to make stuff do
I've
stuff
reached out
that
to
you
these,
know it can do.
yeah, I've reached out
Yeah,
to all this one, like, hey, my friends were playing with this and we have routes that show up. How do I delete that? Crickets. Why do you need to know this?
yeah.
Because I have it and I want to play with it.
Hmm. Uh, yeah, this is a fascinating area. So a few years ago, there was a massive change in the way that people thought about body armor. And some of it was stuff that happened in 2020, but a lot of it was just the internet finally got around to caring about body armor in the way that a few years before the internet finally got around to caring about suppressors. And it went from this mysterious thing that half of gun owners thought that it was illegal to own a suppressor and there was no way to do it, and half, it was something happened that made suppressors interesting enough. People started to document it. People started to read the documentation, and then Jay started to do
Yep.
proper testing and stuff. Uh, it is that happening with night vision now? Because there's always been weirdos. I'm not necessarily pointing at you, but I'm definitely thinking of you and David down in Australia and me a little bit. There's always been some weirdos who are like, we should figure this stuff out.
Oh, no,
Uh,
there's people who are on, like, I feel like an idiot. There's people that just make me feel dumb, like Compass Call on Instagram. He
mhm.
has, it's all self-taught, and he is definitely like PhD level. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. You got to dumb it down for me. The problem is, right, the ITAR problem, right? Trying to document and
Mm,
share the performance level of some of these things could potentially. I kind of disagree. right? Like I understand why ITAR exists. There's no arguments.
Yeah.
But like one of the things that's covered under ITAR is the spec sheets that come with commercial tubes. And people always say, don't show spec sheets online because it's
Yeah.
ITAR controlled. And I'm thinking, okay, I understand why you think this, but some asshole in some other country that's an enemy to us, what is he going to discern from how good my tubes are? Wow, we don't have that. Can he copy that? Absolutely not. No. What are they
Well,
going to do with that
the other
technology?
thing, the other thing that I would point out is people on Instagram who have Gen 3 tubes in their hands cannot agree on what the spec sheets mean anyway.
Yeah.
So
People go
I'm with you. Yeah.
down the weeds with like trying to chase after the best specs possible. And that's one way to do it. When I started with night vision, yes, I started with I guess you would say a mil spec. It was for a security team for a power plant. And they want to trade to thermal. So I had a good performing, I think it was a Harris PVS-14. And did I care about what specs it is? No. And through my experience of playing with so much night vision, right? Low spec, high spec. Yes, high spec is nice, but I'm not going to spend $13,000 when a $6,000 or $4,000 set could basically see the same thing. It'll see better, but it's not seeing double. I'm not seeing twice better than I'm
Yeah.
seeing out of a entry level system. Don't get me wrong. This PVS-31A is awesome, and I like it, and I have it for a reason. But I traded my way up to it. I don't mind starting at the bottom and working my way up
Hmm.
and experiencing, because that's how I built up my experience was I need to try it for myself, right? I can trust some random person online, but if I have the opportunity to look through it, I'll do it, right? Like when,
Hmm.
a local team of PJs were playing with their new clip-ons, I'm like, hey, could you bring out your GPMGs? I want to look through those. I've never seen through those. And it was eye-opening. Like, oh my gosh, this is what,
Hmm.
these are amazing. Okay, I get it now.
Yeah. Yeah. Just it is really interesting what a little bit of peripheral vision does. Auto gating that works well. Like they are small things, but they make a big difference. That's the other reason. I mean, we talked about how hard it is to, or technically impossible it is to show what tubes look like to the human eye with a camera on YouTube that you watch on your screen. Now you're just too far removed from it. But the other thing is, and camera guys, like video cinematographer guys, we do this too. We look at camera tests, and the camera tests and lens tests are shooting charts. We're
Yep.
shooting charts, and we're looking for lens sharpness and chromatic aberration in the corners, and we're looking for all of this stuff, which is, it's quantifiable, so it's really easy to chase. But then you end up just sitting in a dark room shooting a podcast. Like, can you see the corners of no?
Yeah.
If you're shooting certain types of stuff, there are issues with cameras or issues with lens you're never going to run into. And night vision is the same way. A lot of it comes down to application. You are learning a lot of stuff about night vision, but even some of the stuff that you are on the cutting edge of, there are guys who don't need that. They're only using it for this, and there's guys that don't need the other thing because they're only using it for that. Some friends of mine just came back from well, I won't say where they went. They went far out west and they were looking for some bears. And they would have been using thermal only for seeing if there's a bear on a hillside. And then if there was nothing there, they would have put it in their pocket and moved on to the next hill. So super simple, like just looking for hotspots. No identification, nothing. They had,
It's a good thing you mentioned
yeah.
that. A friend of mine
And
actually is having his, I guess, midlife crisis right now. And he's going to this weekend. He's going to Texas to go with Last Shadow, the helicopter hog hunting company. I think
oh,
uh,
yes, yeah.
Lucas did it. I was fortunate enough to ride with them, and I told my friend like, I know you have thermal. What thermal do you have? A Fleer Breach? Bring it. He's like, why? Why would I bring that? It's going to be in the daytime. No, trust me. I did it in the helicopter. I brought thermal with me on the hog hunt in the daytime when I wasn't shooting. My coworker was shooting, and I looked out his side of the helicopter. Holy shit! There's a pig. I can clearly see the pig through all the brush, through all the trees. But then when I open my naked eye, like, oh, okay, the pig is black and everything else. This is March. Everything's kind of dead and grayish. It's easy to
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
Then when it was my turn to shoot, we were shooting coyotes. and they're brown and gray and they're blending in with the vegetation. Even though there's no leaves in
Yes.
the tree when I did, it was hard for me to see the coyotes. It was only movement that I would sort of pick it up. And then this one time, it was running along with a pack of deer, and everyone else like, there it is, shoot it. I'm like, I don't see what you're seeing. It looks like another deer to me. It looks like a small fawn. So I don't know
Hmm.
if thermal would have helped, but thermal in a helicopter trying to look for something alive is
Hmm.
great. I told my friend, look,
Yeah.
just use thermal. You're going to eliminate 90% of things not to look at by just throwing that thermal on, and you can focus on all the other 10%.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that not to beat the dead horse, but it is going to be so application specific, and I think that a lot of us, I certainly want to go into the weeds. I want to chase performance. I want to get the best of the best, but then I also want the do it all device that's going to be good for any situation, and that is usually technically not possible, and if it is remotely technically achievable, it's incredibly expensive
Simplify it.
and
Make it like a tool.
simplified. Yeah.
A Swiss Army
Yeah.
knife is a do-it-all tool. Does it do every single job great? No, but it is an all-in-one tool, right? It can get the job done. But if you need a pry bar, you need a pry bar. If you need a scalpel, you need a scalpel, not a Swiss Army knife, right? But it can
Right.
do the job. There
Yeah.
is no universal one thing that does it all. It's just not. It doesn't exist
Yeah.
in, except maybe
Yeah.
right.
And eyeballs are pretty amazing. There have been a number of times that I've been out in Tennessee where we have heavy overgrowth. There's just so much foliage out here. There have absolutely been times when I was doing better without night vision than with night vision for moving around in the terrain just with a super tiny one of the CJ sear lights with my finger over it. Like almost no light is coming out through my thumb, and it's easier for me to tell what's going on with that little sear light and two eyeballs than a good tube. And safety glasses because all the twigs are at eye level in
Oh
Tennessee. So yeah, but yeah, the tools. I think working backwards from what you're going to do is really important. There are people who want to use thermal for specific things, and if that's the job, then that's the thing that you need to find and be able to do. But my friends who were up in the mountains looking for bear, they could have gotten a lot of stuff done with a super low resolution. They could have been doing fine with some of those old thermals that were like 5 frames a second, 10 frames a second. They could have had a low refresh rate thermal that has a super wide angle and just be like, there's no animals on that hillside. Move on. Like there is a lot of stuff that you could have accomplished with inferior tools because they end up not being inferior for the specific task.
Yep. Yeah,
Mm.
people get too focused on the buy once, cry once mentality of things. And it's like, well, are you really going to use it? Like, you could spend $9,000 now on an SVI Infinity 2011. Are you really going to eke out all the performance of that ridiculously expensive thing? Could you accomplish the same thing with a Glock 19, Glock 17, or
Hmm.
any comparable, competent handgun? Same with night vision, right?
Hmm.
Like, yes, 31As are awesome. I don't think they're $13,000, but again, I could get something of that's half the price that will allow me to see in the dark, allow me to do what I need to do in the dark. Can I see? Can I aim? Uh, that kind of epiphany happened when all my night vision got stolen, and I had to rebuild my collection. I had
Hmm.
really awesome tubes, like they were like blend aviation spec filmless L3. I had four of these things. They're amazing. They're like over 3,000 FOM, but I didn't have them anymore. So let me start with some old mil spec tubes. I can see in the dark. My first set of binos was a pair of old Photonis, clean Photonis Gen 2 tubes, and I took a TMVC Night Fighters course. Yeah, it's darker than the Gen 3 stuff, but I was like second in the class in terms of like running around and gunning, just because I've done it so much. Like the class was
Hmm.
kind of like boring. There's a lot of stagnant, stationary. Like bring your gun up and practice
Hmm.
shooting. Like this is firearm masturbation. I came here to learn things I don't know, but running around and gunning is like second nature now, especially with
Hmm.
knives. And as long as you
Hmm.
have good
Yeah.
illuminator, night vision, you can see. Now, trying to be more operator and go all passive and see with no active illumination, you will be you'll be chasing after performance.
It is tough, yeah, and that is a thing where, for in the military space, that is necessary. At this point, IR light discipline is the same as visible light discipline. Nobody owns the night anymore.
Nope.
Everybody has to be really careful about any type of IR emissions at all, and that's a fascinating thing. And it's been that way for a long time, honestly. But we're absolutely there now, to the point where everybody knows that we're there now.
Yep. Yeah.
So yeah, that's been sort of interesting. What's the weirdest piece of night vision technology that you
Oh,
have now, or that you may have had in your lost collection?
it's show and tell time. No, so the stuff I lost while it hurt wasn't anything that was irreplaceable, except maybe those aviation tubes that I got for next to
Hmm.
me. They were like $800 a pop, a tube. I'm like, I'll take them all. But show and tell time. So this, it's kind of obscure. Some guy had it. It was missing a battery cap. I ended up buying it. So this is French. It's by a company that no longer exists. It's called Sopalem, a TN2. If you Google it, there's a very famous photo of a GIGN uh, uh, police officer wearing these, holding an MP5 SD. It was actually a photo that was taken, there's a much better photo of it that was taken in 1986, 87. So G.I. Jane was rocking night vision for
Classic stuff.
counter-terrorists
Yeah,
in the 80s. Like
yeah.
they had active pointers, not lasers. I think they were like projected,
Mhm.
like some kind
Yeah,
of projected light as an aiming
it was
device.
just a super focused. Yeah, it was very primitive, but they had night vision on. They were still shooting people with revolvers with
Yes,
their night vision on
but that's a
back then.
Nurin MR30 73, whatever it's called. Like that's not your normal revolver.
Yeah,
That's a super revolver.
it's cool enough that it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is very rare. I have yet to find another person that actually has this in their personal collection, uh,
Hmm.
in this country or anywhere else in the world. Um, and what else? This is
How is it to use?
um,
Because you
it's
have
it's old.
experience.
It's very much like a
Yeah.
PVS-7, but the cool thing
Hmm.
is that instead of having the objective in the middle, it's over my dominant eye, right? Southpaws, unfortunately,
So you can actually do some passive aiming
you can. Now
with your existing muscle memory.
they weren't thinking that far ahead because I don't think the red dots existed back in the 80s. But I
The
found
red dots that they had at the time were terrible for this purpose. Yeah.
yes, but I found another photo of GI Gen in the 90s, like early 90s. They're still rocking these. They had a red dot on a shotgun inside an airplane. I thought, holy crap, that's way
That's
advanced.
interesting.
Way
Yeah, that's
advanced.
very forward thinking.
Early
Hmm.
90s. Now, I don't think they were passive aiming through a red dot with a shotgun, but that's they're there to do
Interesting.
business. And it's interesting that's where the
Yeah.
technology led them to. Let's put a red dot on a shotgun. Why not? We got to be precise. You're an airplane. You need to place those shots strategically, surgically. I need to place this in a very specific spot. I can't miss. Red dots make it easier.
Interesting. Yeah.
Um, this is not as rare as this, but it's very uncommon. Uh, this is the loose,
Super low profile
very low.
prismed. Yeah.
Europeans love this low profile binocular thing. I didn't bring it, but the Simrad GN1 is similar. That's Norwegian. This is
Hmm.
French. This is a Thales Lucy. There's a really good photo of it, of also GIGN wearing this thing all kitted up. It looks so cyberpunk-ish. It's just interesting. What's really cool
Yeah.
about this, though, and the reason why I like it, because besides the anime-ish aesthetic, this is 50-degree field of view, not 40 like normal night vision, and there's no distortion. There's no fisheye. There's nothing. Um, so when people start,
That's interesting.
yeah, when people start bringing out 50-degree field of view lenses, I'm like, is it really 50 degree? Is it really good? Like when I look through the boom slangs by Photonis, they're pretty good. But the previous ones, DEP and some other people had 50 degree. AGM had 50 degree. They're awful. They're so bad. Um, Very
Interesting.
narrow eye box, exit pupil. So if you're off center, things start falling off pretty fast and
Bending around. Yeah.
like
Hmm.
blurring. It's just awful. This is very, very, very good. But also
I
very
am
hard to get.
so curious now, like how they're doing that. If those are reticular lenses, whether those are spherical lenses, whether they're doing some correction inside of the prism, because there's a prism that's bouncing,
Yeah.
or is it a mirror? It's probably a prism, but it could be a
So
mirror.
this is
That's now
this is
I'm
this is like a
yeah.
PVS-7. It is using a 10130 tube. Light comes in, it's being bounced diagonally across the tube and then split into the eyes. Um, and then this is probably even more rare. This is the newer version of
Hmm.
this. Uh, I am probably the only person who has one of these in their collection. This came out of the Ukraine. Uh, and it went on a detour to Japan and then came to me. Normally, there is, when you see pictures of it online, this is removed, this is the battery pack, and there's a thermal camera shoved onto the side of it. It's not
Yeah.
rear projection, but it is rear projection because it's all digital. There's no analog signal
Mm.
going in. Whereas PVS-21s, this is the monocular version, they have a port on the side you remove, and there's a projector
Yeah.
that will project it into the stream. It's still behind the tube, and it is rear projection, but it is a projector projecting it like a Kodi.
Yeah.
So you look through a thermal clip-on with a PVS-21s, you do see that difference in color, right? It'll be white against green,
Hmm.
whereas
Yeah.
clip-ons, it's all monochromatic. It's all going through the objective lens.
It has to go through the tube. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas this same thing, it's somehow projecting the thermal image behind the tube.
Yeah. There's a nifty beam splitter setup in there that's doing something cool. And
Yes.
yeah, nifty.
Take a look when you get a chance. Go look at my Simrad GN1 article. That one is a hall of mirrors that is just wild how they bend light. That's even more complicated than this. This is relatively simple. You got light coming in, bending, going diagonally, and then splitting and coming out the eyes. Whereas the Simrad, it's going like in, down, around, outside the housing, come back inside the housing, and then
Yeah.
splits into your eye. It's really convoluted. Norwegians.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a cool concept. Build a whole little optical bench that you wear on the front of your face, just so the center of gravity can be back.
It is kind of fun though, but like the weird thing about running these is your objective lens is much higher. So like when I drive,
Hmm.
my rear view mirror isn't where I normally look at my rear view mirror. It's now I'm like an inch taller. So now my rear view mirror is
Yeah.
looking into the back of my car instead of out the back window. Minor
No,
nuances.
that's why they say always check your mirrors.
Yes.
That's why.
Yeah. Oh, and then I don't know if you ever tried it with driving at night, but that one passenger mirror where it says objects are closer than they appear,
Yeah.
there's a significant focal shift, and I don't understand the reasoning why.
Yes.
When I look through the driver's side
Yeah.
mirror or the rear view mirror, it's perfect. It's infinite. When I look at that mirror, nope, I can't see anything. It's out of focus. I have to shift focus to
Hmm.
objective lens, and I don't understand that. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. I would it's I need to learn more about optical stuff
Yeah.
because it's it's very simple when you read like sixth grade textbook and they show a lens with
Yes.
light lines and the light lines bend. Very simple at that level, but it that's not how everything works.
Yes. Exactly. Um, this I got one more thing. This semi rare. It doesn't seem that interesting. Everyone knows what Anvis looks like, but
Hmm.
the power mount things in the middle, this is not. It's offset. This took a while to
Interesting.
accumulate. So I forget who had it, but somebody had this goggle and wanted to trade for one of these, so I traded it. But trying to find the mount and trying to find the helmet. This was specifically for Cobra helicopter pilots. I don't have this. There's a something
Interesting.
called a helmet sighting system that would go here. That's why this can't
Oh,
be entered.
gotcha. Yeah.
So yeah,
Interesting.
it's just a weird like variant that exists.
Hmm.
And it's almost complete. Yeah,
Super nice. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
like
And
gun
that's
collecting.
that's intriguing.
After a while, like you start looking for other things. That's why like I have this, right? Like I already have
Yeah.
the bulk of okay, I got quads. And I have backup quads. What else? What else do I not have?
Yeah. Well, obviously, the missing pieces of your collection are strange Scandinavian uh, tilt shift and
Yes.
prism and beam splitting devices. And now you're collecting. Now you have things that are really fascinating. Now, some of those devices are tube limited because they have old tubes in them. But I am really intrigued by people who figured out 50-degree field of view in the past, and they were only limited by their tube technology. If that is the kind of thing that's worth bringing back, um, I'm actually really curious about some of those. Kind of what we talked about before. If you want the best possible for all situations device, you want 4 tubes, and you want peripheral vision, and you want a thermal clip-on, and you want the thing. But if you have a more stripped down use case, could it be that that old French style has some value? Uh,
Well, yes and
Easier
no.
to mount, maybe?
I think the PVS-14 is the Glock 17 in night vision world. It will get the
Sure. Yeah.
99% of the job done. I can see in the dark. I can navigate in the dark. Yes, you don't have stereopsis. You don't have depth perception per se, but
Hmm.
when you start using it a lot, like my first PVS-14, I got used to it. I know what it looks like. And then when I finally looked through a PVS-7, it was after like a year and a half or two of me looking through a single tube. My brain tricked me. I thought, I know this is not depth perception, but I feel like it's depth perception because I'm seeing double.
Yeah, it's weird.
But then
Mm.
I looked through real binos, like, oh, okay, wow, okay, magic. Yes, I get it now. But is it necessary? Right? There are
Hmm.
huge advantages running a monocular. Weight is one thing, cost is another,
Hmm.
but depends on the task. If I'm
Yeah.
driving at night, right? Yes, binos are great for seeing depth perception, but sometimes I'm driving out, on a highway or, on a road or something when it's legal and safe to do. Like in Hawaii, I drove up Mauna Kea, the volcano on the Big Island, because they have an observatory there and they had a little astronomer event. It's a really long drive up this volcano, and it was full moon, and I could see for miles with my PVS-14, right? But my left eye is unaided. I can see any light coming down that road because my wife was freaking out, like, your headlights aren't on. What's going to happen? I will be able to see them much sooner than they'll be able to see me. And if someone's coming, turn the headlights back on. So
Yeah.
having a binocular can help because yes, you can see. Some people say, "Oh, you can see ambient light." No, I can see the color of headlights, brake lights,
Mm.
traffic lights. Right? In night vision, you
Yeah.
just see this glowing monochromatic thing. I don't
Hmm.
know what that is.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is another thing, digital night vision. It's going to have weaknesses and inferiorities, but one really cool thing about digital night vision is the ability to see in color. So if you're
Yes.
looking at navigation lights on aircraft or cars or boats,
So
that's a thing for
the
sure.
psionics is obviously marketed that benefit really well, but the stuff that I've been
Hmm.
seeing coming out of China is all monochromatic because just like the Chronos, there's two
They
versions of
strip that, yeah, they strip
light.
that RGB filter right out and you still get monochromatic. Yeah.
Yes,
Hmm.
for better light performance. Same with the
Yeah.
Chronos camera. They sell two versions. One's black and white, one's color. The black and white one's for industrial, scientific study
Hmm.
because it's more sensitive to light
Yeah.
than the color.
I would love to figure out exactly what that is getting you performance wise, because the way the digital sensors work is they are pixels, and you put a red filter on one, and a green filter on one, and a blue filter on one, so that you can see the red light, the green light, the blue light coming in. And if you strip that out, uh, all the red, green, and blue light is hitting all the photons are hitting all the pixels. So you do get a significant performance increase. Um, what I really want somebody to do, and this is going to be hard from a processing perspective, but I would really like to have multiple camera arrays with identical lenses, like some cell phones do. In the old days, cell phones used to do a little bit more of the these were the same cameras with slightly different setups, and now they're all just different focal lengths. But one that is full spectrum and no RGB filter for maximum performance. And then right next to it, one that is RGB so that you can cleverly in software blend the two and get the best of both worlds. And then right next to it, of course, you put a thermal one. Then right next to that, of course, you put your laser rangefinder. Then right next to that, you put your other thing. But now we're kind of talking about observation devices,
Yeah.
multi-use observation devices, which I feel like we should split off to a future conversation because that's a
Talk
whole
about
other thing.
the amazing thing.
Yeah, show us the amazing thing.
Oh, you've seen it before. It's the Gimler.
Yeah, it's got a bunch of different optical paths,
Yeah.
cameras, sensors,
But with this,
and
I can see
emitters.
people 6,000 yards away.
Yeah, I mean it's basically just fancy binoculars, right?
Really, really expensive. Like
Yeah.
Corvette pricing
Yeah, I
binoculars.
was actually going to ask you on this. So things that are easy to buy, it's generally pretty easy to figure out the price. Things that are hard to buy, it can be really hard to figure out the price. Can you talk about the pricing for
So
that particular unit?
yes, people have asked me these questions before. It depends on what number you want to know. Do you want to know how much the government overpaid for something? Yes, that's kind of documented. What is the actual street value, if you want to call it that? It just depends on
Hmm.
demand, right? Like this is awesome, right? But it's really old technology. It's 320 resolution, and it's amazing for what it is. I have another device, the FLIR C Spot. No one wants it. It's a gigantic, big thermal camera thing that sits on top of a PEC 1 SOFLAM. It is cooled thermal, but it's very limited in what it can do. It's very narrow field of view, very high mag. It's great for observation, but they were sold for under 2 grand, right? Whereas this thing is different. This got GPS. It has a laser rangefinder that's true SWIR. It's 1550 nanometers. It'll range past 10 kilometers, right? It has a day channel. It has cool thermal with optical zoom. Like this is amazing technology. Uh,
Yeah.
what did Vectronics charge versus what it goes for now? It's varying because there's not that many of these out there. I saw one person try to sell one. I think they're in Turkey for like $45,000. I had two of these. I sold one of them for 20 grand. Um, it didn't cost me that much because the people who had it like didn't really know its value. They know it's worth something, right?
Hmm.
This unit that I got because it came with a magnifier was worth way more to me because this is the true superpower. Afocal thermal magnifiers for cool thermal is a true superpower. Having a magnifier on thermal, people
Yeah.
don't usually play with those, but it greatly boosts, just like our eyeballs, right? I see something. I wish I had something that I could see closer. Oh, I do. It's called binoculars. Afocal magnifiers do that with thermal, and you can do it for long wave or cooled mid wave IR. The
Mm.
cooled ones are harder to get; they're
Yeah.
more expensive. But throwing a simple magnifier in front of your thermal might not be great, or it might be good, but it's much better. I can see way closer. I can see much
Hmm.
further. So instead of recognizing, hey, that is animal shaped ish, throw on a magnifier. Okay, that's clearly a dog and not a
Yeah.
coyote. That's important.
Yeah.
It comes down to the
Now you say a simple magnifier,
yeah, they're
but
not
it's not
simple.
quite that
No,
simple
they're
because
not.
it's got to be made out of germanium or
Yes,
there are a few they call them synthetic germaniums. They're not actually synthetic germanium. These are fairly exotic materials.
yes.
Actually, there's a germanium shortage that we are dealing with at the moment
Quartz
because
apparently quartz
most of
land.
the germanium comes out of places that we're not friends with right now. So
Uh,
that has kind of impacted things a little bit. Russia and China have germanium mines and have done most of the purification. And then there are starting to be more consumer demands for germanium lenses for thermal cameras for like,
huge.
yeah, self-driving cars and various other things. There's all sorts of new applications where heat sensitivity, the ability to see heat, is very important and useful for certain industrial and commercial stuff. So the demand for germanium is way up. The
I think
supply is coming down a little bit. It's interesting.
I want to see Swear take off a little bit more. It's still really
Hmm.
um niche, super niche. But
Yeah.
ones I've seen on YouTube, right, the really expensive ones, can see through things that we can't, like marine
Yeah.
lake, fog, clouds, right? There's no technology that I know that
Hmm.
can see through those things. Thermal kinda does, right? Night vision can't see through those kind of,
Right. Yeah.
weather conditions. Looking through
Yeah.
what looks like opaque things, SWIR can see right through it. So,
Hmm.
but it's
Yeah.
certainly
Very interesting.
a
Yeah.
thermal
So there's
SWIR sensors that are like the
we
size of
should
a nail. It's 20 grand.
yeah, it's and those again, industrial. The people who are making those things are not so much for tactical applications, but industrial applications. Being
Yes.
able to see gas leaks or being able to see into industrial fires, that is where those things are going. And so, yeah, if you're looking after a $10 million chunk of an oil refinery, a $20,000 camera is nothing. That's absolutely and
Oh,
that's not the camera. That's just the sensor.
real quick, going back to the 1550 nanometer, that weird wavelength of SWIR,
Yeah.
these rangefinders are ridiculously powerful, but they are eye safe. There's something that has to do with the way our eyes are made. Like infrared
Yeah,
finders,
it's
yes, they will,
fascinating.
but 1550 nanometers, it doesn't absorb through the eyeball like 1064 or 950 H60, whatever IR lasers. They are eye safe. They're not camera sensor safe. I've proven that. I had a ridiculously powerful rangefinder and I couldn't see it with night vision or digital. I'm like, what's going on? I saw a real faint blip. Let me look straight into it with a Sonic's Aurora. Cooked the sensor. And then
Yep,
Sonic, why
there's
would you do
a lot of
it?
energy in there.
It said eye safe. I thought it'd be
Yeah,
okay.
there's a whole new world or it's not new. There's a whole world out there that exists in between the visible light spectrum and the night vision visible light spectrum. And it is cool that people are starting to document that better, learn more about it. But yeah, there are interesting aspects to it. Like you're out of band here, but it's in band for something else. It's out of band for eye damage, but it's totally enough energy to cook a sensor. That has some fascinating implications. I've been trying to figure out. I don't know if I want to say this in the podcast. I've been trying to figure out tools, just tools. I'm only talking about tools here. Tools that are going to affect certain sensors without having any risk to human beings. And that is, yeah, that's an interesting question. Something that you might want to
That's
do.
hard to do.
It's hard to
Hey,
do. People immediately think of EMPs and stuff like that, but lasers that don't hurt your eyes that do actually do other stuff is an interesting study.
yes. I mean, I've heard too many stories from my friends that there are devices that could detect uh, if you're being actively lased. They're looking
Hmm.
for some kind of infrared signal, right? That's all it has to do is
Yeah.
detect it, and it'll tell you what direction it came from. But how
Hmm.
hard would it be to create a system that says, "Hey, it came from this direction. Let's send a pulse in that back in that same direction." That's
Yeah.
not hard to do with the right
Yeah.
engineering and coding, right? Or you
Right.
just wide, flat, you know, light
Just
laser.
shoot a two-dimensional. Yeah. Well, it's happening now with somewhat passively. So obviously, we all know about face detect capability. It's built into most of our security cameras that you can buy on Amazon right now. But aperture detection there is even easier in some ways. There are sensors and cameras out there that are looking for perfectly round or perfectly oval things because that is probably a camera lens or a rifle scope. And
Yes.
so there are already a number of military devices that do aperture protection that look for these things. And then there may or may not be devices that find an aperture and then shoot a bit of energy into it with the laser. That may or may not be happening. We couldn't possibly say ITAR, maybe? I'm not sure why we can't say.
I've heard of other things where like it detects metal. It's looking for some kind of reflective
Like a
signal,
spectrograph. Yeah.
and it'll see through coatings. Uh, and it seems to be a problem. One of my friends, he was the one that had that sniper phantom ghillie thing. Um,
Hmm.
Overwatch Solutions, I think it's called. He's a sniper, and he was telling me how there's a shift now where they want to separate the observer, the spotter, from the shooter, and completely separate them,
Hmm.
like not just distance, but like angle. And I'm like, that's going to be very
Yeah.
complicated because if the spotter says, "Hey, there's your target," now the shooters are at a different angle. How do you calculate the math on that? But then ATAC, there is a
ATAC has some cool tools. Are we
yes.
supposed to talk about this thing that you're about to talk about?
No, I'm just it's simple math. Applied ballistics exists
Simple
on it,
math, yeah.
right? And the technology is there.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I'm here on this map, you're here on this map, and we can see the same thing you're looking at. And the math is already done in my little end user device, and it'll
Yeah.
automatically calculate my ballistic from where I am to that point.
And three-dimensionally too, because one of
Yes.
the cool things about ATAC is it's not just a flat map. It knows elevation and digital elevation map data and even building data. And so,
And so I argue,
yeah, it can be pretty clever.
but why do you need a spotter anymore? Now you just need a drone pilot, right? Who's
Hmm.
much further away and says, hey,
Yeah.
there's a thing here. Boop, set that waypoint, right? That's a
Yeah.
bag. And then if you're close and you can see the same waypoint, you know how far you are. The ballistic's already done for you. But the only thing is,
That's,
you have to look down at this thing. And that's why I was trying to talk
yeah.
to people like, hey, the HUD that this can produce, it just shows me waypoints, however
Yeah.
I do it, but doesn't show me the ballistics. I want to be able to see ballistics.
Yeah.
How hard would that be? Like, okay, I know how far that is. Here's what your ballistic is set for in the device right now.
That's what we will talk about in our next conversation because there's a whole rabbit trail that I want to go down with observation devices. We've kind of we cracked the can of worms open a little bit, but that is something that I want to talk about next time because we can't just go on forever on this one episode. I feel like this has been a great teaser for that conversation. Uh, is there anything you want to plug, Nick, while we have you here? Thank you so much for showing your collection
Yeah.
to us and
Uh,
all the work that you've done in documenting and supporting other folks in the industry. Uh, you're working with some guys now. Is there anything that you want to plug real quick?
um, Not the moment. They're apparently gonna create a different company for just the digital thermal stuff. But
Okay,
a
yeah.
lot of people I think know me through the Firearm blog, the Fire Night Lights. I'm no longer with them
Hmm.
anymore, but you can follow. I'm still documenting what I can on my own website,
Hmm.
VF1 Systems. It's free. I should probably charge, but
Yeah.
it's still free. I need an
Just do what
outlet.
Jay does, but for now, I'm glad it's free. Yeah.
I just need an outlet to keep documenting things. I like documenting things, right? This stuff is very esoteric. It's very rare, and it's very hard to find documentation of any kind, let alone detailed photos and explanations of how some of these things work. And I just like doing that.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. It's totally my jam. The fact that you are cutting edge stuff, old fashioned history, practical knowledge, making new things. It's just it couldn't be more up my alley. I'm so glad that you're out there doing what you're doing, and that we've been able to chat about it in the past. And in the future, we will talk about observation devices and practical applications for them. So, thank you so much for being on the show. We'll look forward to that. And yeah, I have some ideas for you offline too.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me.